science has been a blessing and a curse. Trust in the magical and mystical has diminished, while the call for proof in science has skyrocketed. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how science has finally caught up with what ancient yogis have known for centuries. And I'll give you proof that meditation worked for me. Welcome to this episode of the Michelle Fondin Author vlog, where I help you understand ancient wisdom for your modern soul. This is episode 20. And as promised, I always feature one or two books, in all of my vlogs. And this time I have two books for you. My latest book, The 8 Limbs of Yoga from Modern Times, a practical guide to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and Enlightened Medicine, Your Power to Get Well Now, an integrative approach to healing the 7 deadly lifestyle diseases. And in chapter 9 of this book, I talk about the benefits of meditation from a scientific perspective. Now, this book was published in 2018, but what I am referring to is a very recent publication that happened from UC San Diego on a longitudinal study of meditation and its effects on the brain and body, which we'll talk about more in the next video this week. If you are new to my channel, I want to welcome you here. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. I teach meditation online on demand, and I have a special promo code for you for this week. It is Peace75. You can take $75 off my immersion into meditation course. You will get your personalized mantra from me over Zoom. Otherwise, the course is available on demand online. I'm here with my pals. As every week on the Michelle Fondin Author vlog, I have Grogu here and I have Hawaiian Gudetama. I really miss Hawaii. I need to go back soon. I've got my Grogu tumbler with my Tocino Dandelion Caramel Nut Tea. It is so good for this nice fall day in November. And we are going to get started because I'm passionate about meditation. Guess what? It is 2025. It is November of 2025. And I'm really celebrating 18 years of meditating with my mantra that I learned in 2007. It was November of 2007. So it's truly been 18 years since I've been meditating. First, let's talk a little bit about this notion of trust and faith, because I really want to talk about this before we go into the proof of how I've been meditating for 18 years and all of the beautiful things that have come out of that, all of the proof that's come out of my meditation practice for 18, I can't believe it's been 18 years. They say with each decade of meditation practice, you look a decade younger than your chronological age. So for me, it's been almost 2 decades. So that means I look 20 years younger than my chronological age. I will go for that any day. Let's talk a little bit about trust and faith. You know, science is great, right? Science is great. But in today's information age, in today's day and age where people are scouring the internet to look for proof of everything and anything, you've got to prove it to me before I'll believe it. If I don't have that hardcore proof, those hardcore facts, the scientific proof, then I am not going to believe it. Well, as you know, most spiritual practices, meditation being included, meditation is not a religious practice, but it's a spiritual practice. It can be religious if somebody decides to infuse meditation into their religion, but it's a spiritual-based practice. Yes, it has practical effects, but it's a spiritual-based practice. So as in any spiritual-based practice, it requires you to have faith versus needing the proof first. Now, my meditation course, because it wasn't written by me originally, it was written by Dr. Deepak Chopra and Dr. David Simon. Note the prefix to their names, doctors of science, right? Of medical science. So they really infused a lot of proof in the meditation course that I teach. But really, when you think about it, meditating as a spiritual practice is like the proof is in the pudding, right? And I feel like the more we search for proof, the more it takes out the magic and mystery of life. Honestly, right? Isn't it better when you do something and you put your faith and trust into it, and then you got this great result, or coincidences and synchronicities happened? Isn't that a lot more magical and adds to the flavor of life in a more delicious way than when you go into something knowing the outcome, going, well, there's scientific proof for this, so if I do A and then B happens, I will get C results, and I already know that because it's scientifically proven. That's pretty lackluster if you think about it, right? There's a lack of mysticism. There's a lack of magic and happiness and joy and synchronicities and coincidences. And so when you go into a practice like meditation, sure, your brain might need some reason, some proof, some scientific proof even that it works. But meditation as a spiritual practice is much better if you go into it with a little bit of trust and faith that the process will work. And in fact, when I teach meditation, that's what I teach. When I started meditation, I had no idea what to expect, but more on that in a minute. I'm going to give you another analogy. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone, and maybe you just fell in love with this person, or this person fell in love with you, and the person asked you, why? Why do you love me? And you might give them some reasons, because you're nice and you're kind and you're generous, or you're handsome, or you're a good lover, or whatever reason you want to give them. And for them, that's not satisfying enough. They're like, no. Why do you love me? And you might give them some other reasons, but finally, if they keep pressing with the question, they're like, I don't know. I love you because I love you. And if you have been in that position where you are asking the person, like, why do you love me? Do you love me? Why do you love me? What are the exact reasons why you love me? Pretty soon that person's going to get a little bit exasperated with the question, because we can't necessarily explain away the mysticism and the mystery of love, right? Sometimes we just fall in love with someone and we have no logical explanation as to why we have fallen in love with them. It's the same way with any spiritual practice, right? So if you were to take the mysticism out of love or falling in love and scientifically prove the reason why you might fall in love with a specific person, it kind of takes the magic out of it, right? It takes the magic out of it. And then it becomes a little lackluster, because you're like, oh, I don't like this anymore. I don't even know if I like this person anymore. It was magical before, but now the magic's all gone. So when you go into a practice like meditation, you really have to go into it with this feeling of, yes, there might be scientific proof, but I'm going to go into this with the innocence of knowing that I can trust the process, that I can have faith that it'll work for me. And maybe it will work for me in mysterious ways that are not scientifically proven. Maybe it'll work for me in mysterious ways that even I could not explain. And I would have a hard time explaining that to others as well. So here is my story about learning meditation and the scientific proof of how it worked for me. Now, this article that I'll talk about in my next video denotes the changes, the immediate changes in the brain and body through a meditation retreat. And that is exactly how I personally learned. It wasn't the way I planned on learning, it's just the way I learned. I went to a Chopra Center retreat back in 2007. It was in November, so 18 years ago to this month. And I went there with no knowledge of meditation except for guided meditations that I had done with a therapist. So I really did not know, besides practicing yoga, how meditation actually worked. So I went into this pretty blindly. I went into it not wanting to learn to meditate per se, but I was enrolling in the Ayurvedic program and the yoga teacher training program with the Chopra Center, but they required each student to take primordial sound meditation first before anything else. So I embarked upon this 8-day meditation retreat, never having meditated by myself for my entire life up until that moment. Now here is where the proof comes in. I had this problem for quite some time. When I had my first child, I guess maybe a year into having my first child, I developed a phobia. That phobia was a fear of flying. And it wasn't just, oh, I'm kind of afraid of flying. It was a crippling fear of flying. Now, here is the rub. I lived in France at the time that I went to this meditation retreat in San Diego, California. And I have family in the United States, and I was living in France. And so it was a requirement that I fly. It wasn't like a row your boat across the Atlantic Ocean. That just was not an option. So I had to fly, but I had this crippling fear of flying, and nothing could work. Drugs did not work. I don't drink alcohol. That wasn't even a thing. I would get into the plane and my anxiety would go through the roof. And then if the plane would budge a little bit, like we're not even talking turbulence, it would bounce a little bit as planes are going to do in the air. And I would just go into full-on panic attacks. And it was really bad. It was really crippling every time I had to take a flight. And it was even before the flight, like I would imagine what was going to happen while I was on the flight. So that made it like 100 times worse. So I had this crippling fear for years before going to this meditation retreat. Now, what's funny is since I didn't know what to expect during the meditation retreat, since I didn't know what to expect during meditation, I thought meditation was dumb at the time. I thought meditation is doing absolutely nothing. You're sitting around doing nothing, closing your eyes. What a ridiculous practice. That was my thought at the time. I thought, well, you can do things to grant yourself some peace. You could do yoga. You could do prayer. You could do affirmations, but I never thought meditation was the thing. And so I went through the movements of this meditation retreat kind of mechanically. I did what I was told. I learned my mantra. I went through the classes. I listened to the lectures. I was meditating during the retreat. We were meditating. It was meditation light, if you will. It wasn't like a silent meditation at the time. It wasn't like we were meditating for 12 hours a day. This was more for the general public, like people that were not meditators. And so we were meditating probably 3 to 4 hours a day, which is already a lot, going from 0 to 3 to 4 hours a day, every day for 8 days. So we were meditating for 3 to 4 hours a day, every single day, doing yoga in between, eating vegetarian, organic, Ayurvedic lunches and dinners. So we were eating healthfully, doing healthy practices. And I didn't really have a lot of intentions for my meditation retreat, except for I was going through a divorce at the time and I wanted some clarity on that. That was really my only intention. My intention was just to get the course done, basically. Get this done so I can start with my yoga teacher training. Get this done so I can continue with my Ayurvedic studies. That was really the point and purpose to it. But here's what I found. On the way home from that meditation retreat, I was sitting on the ground at LAX airport. I had a night flight and the flight was delayed. So it was like supposed to leave at 10 and I don't think the flight left until midnight. And I'm sitting on the floor with all my bags at LAX airport going into a panic because I'm about to board another flight. And as I'm sitting, going into a full-on panic attack, I told myself, well, what if I were just to meditate during the flight? What if I use this newfound skill and use it on the flight? Now, we were taught to meditate for 30 minutes at a time, but I thought, what the heck? I'm going to be in this flight for the next 14 hours or something like that. So why don't I just meditate for the whole flight? Let's see what happens. And so I did. I meditated through that whole flight. Again, 12 to 14 hours. I don't even remember how long it was at that time. And I landed in France and I was fine. Now, here is the proof. The proof is, from that point forward, I never feared flying again, ever. It took an 8-day meditation retreat, one flight of meditation, and I was completely cured. Now, how do you explain that, right? There is a lot of physicality that happens with a panic attack. There are many physical symptoms. There are mental symptoms. There are physical symptoms. There are psychological symptoms that happen with panic and anxiety. And in one go, all of that was cured for me. And that is when I was sold on meditation. That is when I was sold on the meditation practice that I personally learned, a mantra-based meditation technique. So for me, I really didn't need any more proof than that because it worked for me. And of course, as I continued, there were other things in my body, there were other things in my brain that altered as a result of my meditation practice. So it was pretty amazing for me to see the results. But again, for me, it was more about faith and trust. It was more about that than having the scientific proof because I really didn't know what to expect. I think it was that. Had I gone into it having done a lot of research on meditation, now granted, this was almost 20 years ago, the research about meditation and meditative practices from a scientific standpoint were not as prevalent as they are today, but I'm sure they were out there. So what I grew to know is that the ancient yogis were correct, that meditation does work, even though it felt like I was doing nothing, right? It felt like, oh, I'm just sitting here for 30 minutes doing absolutely nothing. And what I teach in my meditation course as well is that you are not doing nothing, you are actually doing everything. Because as you meditate, you're plugging into universal consciousness. And so as you plug into universal consciousness, you are aligning with the flow of the entire universe. And the problem again with science is that we are so far behind what nature already knows, right? There's no way that we could possibly pinpoint or prove everything that nature and universal consciousness does absolutely naturally, because you almost have to stop time to understand it from a scientific level, from a scientific point. Whereas the stream of consciousness that happens with universal flow is just continually flowing. So there is no stopping it necessarily. But science is trying to stop time in order to get to the proof. And that's really hard to do for so many things. So that is why I personally believe that, yes, okay, a little scientific proof is a nice to have. But if you can just trust in the flow and trust that a spiritual practice such as meditation really does work, and I am total proof that it does. And I was one of the greatest skeptics really going into a meditation practice. And I appreciate it today. Honestly, I appreciate both. Like, I appreciate it when science catches up with what ancient yogis have been saying for thousands of years. And really, that's what I write about in my book, The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, because the Upanishads are the original text, the Vedic text from which the 8 Limbs of Yoga comes from. The Upanishads are over 2,000 years old, or maybe 3,000. They have a hard time dating them because they were first oral tradition and then they were written. But they've been around for thousands of years, and they were saying the same things about the benefits of meditating. Go figure, right? Go figure. How did they know? They didn't have the scientific evidence that we have today. So it's always amusing to me because when I see these scientific articles that prove the validity of meditation, I'm always like, all right, you go with that. Because I've known it for 18 years. I've known for 18 years that it actually does work and how well it works. So, food for thought, bringing that ancient wisdom to your modern soul. But yeah, with anything mystical and magical, keep the mystery in it. Keep a little of the magic in it. It makes life so much more delicious when you do that. So I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this with others who might be a little skeptical about meditation, or maybe they've been told, like, do some mindfulness, do some meditation. It'll help with your blood pressure. It'll help with your heart condition. And they're really, really skeptical. Show them my video. And also, if you'd like to immerse yourself into meditation with your personal mantra, you can take $75 off with the promo code PEACE75. And do purchase one of my 12 published books. It really helps out. And I will see you in the next video.